Welcome to Northwest Tech Show. I'm Dave Duncan, and this is a show where we talk about technology and how a better understanding of it can help you have better outcomes at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. We're going to kick things off, as we like to do, with a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at Twit TV.
This is Twit. So Deep Fusion's coming out, and that changes everything, or what? It's in the developer beta now. Nilay Patel calls it sweater mode because all of Apple's demos with the with the Deep Fusion
I can see why they would do that, though, because the sweater, you can zoom in to see the knit of the sweater. So I can see why they're doing that. They're using like a very textured.
Okay. So what does Deep Fusion do that's new, Lori? Look at your article. Or are you still writing it?
Well, we didn't do a whole lot about Deep Fusion because it wasn't out yet. Right. So nobody has written anything about Deep Fusion yet, but don't worry, it's coming.
Okay.
It enhances it and sort of like makes it like a little bit brighter and deeper. It's almost like having and this is silly to go this far, but it's sort of like having a film camera. You really get it captures the detail in a much better way, in a much deeper way, so that you kind of get like a brighter, clearer picture going. So if you can remember, your old film photographs, if you were to put them into your computer and like zoom and zoom and zoom, you get really deep and get really detailed way in the background. You can do that. Not quite like that, but you can really get that kind of extra detail with the Deep Fusion going.
Here's from The Verge's article. The iPhone 11 Pro cameras will now have 3 new modes of operation that will automatically kick in based on light levels and the lens you're using. The standard wide-angle lens. Standard wide-angle lens is not ultra-wide. It's what I'd call the normal lens, the middle lens, right? Yeah. We'll use Apple's enhanced Smart HDR for bright to medium lit scenes. Deep Fusion will kick in for medium to low light, and then it's night mode for dark scenes. The telelens will use mostly Deep Fusion with Smart HDR taking over for very bright scenes, night mode for very dark scenes. The ultra-wide does not support either Deep Fusion or night mode. It always uses Smart HDR. Yeah. That's confusing. But the whole point is Apple doesn't want you to even know this, right? They don't even want you to think about it.
I was gonna say exactly that. Something that confused me was, okay, when is it taking a regular picture? When is it using Smart HDR? And when is it using Deep Fusion? I know that it's giving me a visual reminder whenever I'm using night mode, where they could have just simply said, and we've used a lot of new technologies to make sure that no matter what the situation, it will take the best picture possible. When they're talking about, okay, now it's using Deep Fusion, now it's using Smart HDR, now it's not even doing
nerds.
HDR at all.
We want to know what the hell's going on.
Google would just put it in a blog post. Like Google would just say, we use HDR Plus for older pixels, and we use Super Zoom for newer pixels, and here's all the nerdy details. And it's in a blog post only nerds will find.
And hide it. Yeah.
It's also a little confusing because supposedly night mode only uses the ultra wide,
the super wide. Yeah.
Yes. No, it only uses the regular wide angle.
Well, it says though it will use night mode for standard and tele if the scenes are very dark.
Yeah, I believe it'll crop in. It'll like simulate like the way it does for some of the other shots when there's not enough light. It'll simulate the telephoto because you have enough data. You can't simulate ultra wide because the ultra wide has. The main shooter, the wide angle, has 100% focus pixels, really good OIS. It's like the best 12 megapixel camera you can get, and it does all the heavy lifting. The telephoto has some focus pixels and OIS, but it's because of the aperture, it's not as good at low light. So sometimes it'll switch to the main camera and just machine learn it to make it look like the telephoto. The ultra wide angle has no focus pixels and no OIS, but it can get wider shots. But you can't simulate that with the wide angle because you don't have the ultra wide data to work off of.
Right. So this is what Apple told Nilay. There's no indicator in the camera app that Deep Fusion is on. It's invisible to the user. There's no indicator in the photo roll. It doesn't show up in the EXIF data. Apple says that's very much intentional. It doesn't want you to think about how to get the best photo. The idea is the camera will just sort it out for you. By the time, it's different than Smart HDR. I guess that's important. By the time you press the shutter button, the camera's already got 3 frames. They talked about this on stage. At a fast shutter speed, that's to freeze motion. Press the shutter, it takes 3 more shots. And then 1 long exposure shot, overexposed probably, to capture detail. The 3 regular shots and the long exposure shot are merged together into what they call a synthetic long. Then Deep Fusion picks the short exposure image with the most detail. It has 3, remember. Merges it with the synthetic long exposure, but it only merges those 2 frames. The 2 images are also processed for noise differently than Smart HDR in a way that's better for Deep Fusion. Then, that's not all.
Yeah.
The images are run through 4 detail processing steps. This is all, by the way, in the blink of an eye, while basically while you're looking at the picture. Pixel by pixel, each tailored to an increasing amount of detail. So this is where the machine learning comes in. The skies and the walls, lowest band, skin, hair, fabrics, the highest, or sweaters, the highest band. And then this creates a series of weightings for how the 2 images are blended, taking detail from one and tone, color, and luminance from the other, then generating the final image. I presume, Renee, that you already have this. You're on developer beta, yes?
Yeah, although it hasn't shown up for me yet. But Matthew Panzarino
okay.
also has a really good write-up on TechCrunch where he gets into a lot of the details about how the 2 images are generated and merged. But it's really smart. Like it takes those 2 final images and generates a double size, I think 24 megapixel final image out of it. And it's a little bit like, I know some people really want to be able to manually control night mode and they can't, or they want to manually control Deep Fusion and they can't. He has a good workaround though. If you turn on what we were just talking about, that magic crop, it turns off Deep Fusion because it's forcing the ultra wide to shoot, and Deep Fusion can't use the ultra wide. So right now, because of that technical limitation, you have to choose between having the extra crop data or having Deep Fusion, but you can play one off the other.
I have to say, in the sample images that Apple's provided, here's another guy in a sweater. It's amazing. I mean, because if
you can see an eyelash on one of the sweaters. It is really astounding.
Yeah, the detail's really good. And yet where you don't care about detail, it's fine. Neil says it takes about a second longer for the image to be processed, but that's a second is 1001.
You can't beat it. Like when I was trying it at the event, by the time you hit the gallery button, it's pretty much done. So like you'd have to be a super fast interface person to even see the end bit of it, I think.
Yeah. And that's really something that Apple needs to be praised for, in addition to the quality of the images. That one of the frustrating, I think that my Pixel camera takes really good pictures, but the number of times where it just takes a while to process something, the number of times where I can't get the next picture in as fast as I want to take it, is just frustrating. The biggest fail of any camera, no matter who's designing it, no matter whether it's a phone or whether it's a traditional camera, is you press the button to take a picture and it does not take a picture, no matter what the excuse is. Whereas every single iPhone I've ever used from the very, very beginning, when you press that white button, it will take some kind of a picture. That will never be anything less than good, and that's what a phone camera is supposed to be able to do. It's not necessarily all the extras that you can get in an app like Halide Camera and everything you can do within the regular camera app to adjust exposure, change focus points, use different modes. Those are all great, but the whole purpose of a phone camera is here is a big white button, and when you push this, you will get a picture that is not less than very good. Because that's what people use phone cameras for. I mean, people like me who are nerds for photography, I love editing it on the device. I love putting it on my MacBook and then seeing what all kinds of monkeying around with Photoshop can do. But people want a good snapshot of this place where they went to, or their friends at this bar, or their parents seeing their grandkid for the first time. They don't necessarily care that, oh, well, the shadow detail isn't very, very good, or there's a blown highlight right here. They want to make sure if they press this white button, all they got to do is press the button, they'll get a really, really good picture. they don't want to have to like shake the camera to figure out why is it kind of locked up right now, and why is the white button gray for the next 2 or 3 seconds, which is what you get sometimes with Android cameras. So I don't want that to be lost in the shuffle with all this technical stuff about what it's doing with machine learning and processing. The fact is, push a white button, get a really good picture. That's always been the thing that is almost exclusively a feature of the iPhone.
Fun to know. Yeah. Panzerino points out that while this is actually a really good tip. Make a note of this when you get Deep Fusion. There's currently no way to turn off the Deep Fusion process, but because the overcrop feature of the new cameras uses the ultra-wide, a small hack to see the difference between Deep Fusion and not Deep Fusion is to turn on overcrop, which will disable Deep Fusion as it does not use the ultra-wide lens. Renee, would you explain what he just said to me? I don't understand. What is that?
So there's a hardware limitation where, because there's no optical image stabilization and no focus pixels on the ultra-wide, it's not used for a lot of the fancy stuff. It really is just a regular camera. It's not used for night mode. It's not used for any of those things. So when that is enabled, it can't do a lot of the extra things. But when you turn that off, it's going to, so I'm not explaining this very well. Deep Fusion can't have the ultra-wide camera on at the same time, and the extra area data can't be used when Deep Fusion is on. So you can pick between the two, and whichever one you pick is on, the other one turns off.
And remind me again, how do we turn on the extra area data? Is that live?
That was what we did before when you went to the camera app and you said capture outside of...
Capture. So if you turn that off, you'll have to turn that off to get any Deep Fusion.
Yes,
images.
Correct. And if you turn it on, it turns off.
So that's why Apple leaves that off by default. So I'm going to go back into my camera.
Well, they said no. They said that wasn't. There was like other technical reasons, which I understand is privacy based.
Yeah. You said that too.
It'd be better for people to have it off.
When do we get Deep Fusion? If it's in beta, developer beta now, it's still a little ways off, right?
Yeah, usually a couple for the point releases were pretty fast though. I mean, 3.1.1 came out
at the torrid rate of point releases. Who knows?
Yeah,
they are paddling while bucketing on.
It's kind of amazing.
I can't even keep up anymore. I was actually just updating to 3.1.2 right now while we were talking
because
oh yeah, that's right, that came out too.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. The clip we just heard was from MacBreak Weekly 681, Creative Commons on twit.tv, Deep Fusion Cam. And so talking about, this is something I think like 10, 12 years ago, I was hearing about from someone saying, here's the conference where we're seeing the technology that's coming down the pike in the next 10 years. And it was really all about computational photography, that it was going to start to be more important what was behind the lens rather than the lens itself. So this is more examples of this Deep Fusion. There was another technology, I thought that's what they were talking about when I saw this topic pop up, where you could take a wide shot and then you could go in and take a bunch of close-up shots that really got the texture of something and the detail, and it would computationally interweave the detail from the close-up shots, figure out where they were supposed to be in the wide shot, and just add that detail. And this is doing something not completely unrelated. It's taking a bunch of shots, and they explained it pretty well, taking a bunch of shots and then, taking some detail value and using the colors from the overall shot and all that. They're doing very long exposure stuff. They're taking multiple... One of the things that's a problem with bringing up the brightness of digital photography is all this sort of random noise that's on the sensor. And through multiple shots and through computation, the computer is very good at now with the algorithms and the computing power they have now of figuring out what is noise and what is actually supposed to be there. And sometimes it overdoes it. And when you do, you get something, like you take a picture of someone and with that technology turned up too high and they just look like a plastic doll or something, because it's like taking out too much. It's mistaking actual detail for noise and taking it out. But it's pretty astounding what's possible. And I kind of look at this latest generation of iPhone and I'm just like, really? It's just like got 3 lenses on the back. It's starting to look a little crazy.
Kind of like a spider face.
Yeah. We're getting a multifaceted, like a fly eye or something. Is this going to be all these?
Do we have like any sheaths yet? Like a portable
Like a
vault,
case.
like a vault that you can put this thing in.
So you can close the great eye?
So you can close the eye and, close any signals going to it. So if you want to have a private business conversation, you don't have people just listening in.
That's right. A Faraday cage, and maybe just for safety, an EMP pulse.
That's right.
Make sure.
Pretty soon it's going to be like those little Russian paper mache dolls. Those ones that have the little dolls inside the little dolls inside the little dolls.
Oh, the nesting dolls, yeah.
I forget what they're called. But
yeah. Nesting dolls, yeah.
So this technology, I'm a little lost. Is it actually an improved lens, or is it actually math that's improving the resolution of the photo, or is it both?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So what they did is they've made a mechanically 3 different zooms of lenses that it's looking through.
Right. Okay, so this is scary to me, and this is why. So historically, I've always made my photos like no more than 8 pixels wide that I post on Facebook.
8 pixels?
I'm sorry, 800 pixels.
Oh, thank you.
Let me add 2 digits. Yeah. But 8 pixels would work really well.
That's for security.
Exactly.
Don't want any unexpected detail there.
Oh, man. Well, and see, that's why I do it, though, on the 800 pixels wide, because you can't zoom in enough to really look at...
You can't read
You can't read someone's, eye makeup.
Or even when they were talking about a few years ago where, actually, yes, last year or the year before, the Japanese kids like to do the peace sign, the victory sign or whatever. And they're saying, by the way, cameras are now good enough that they can read your fingerprints when you do that.
Right, exactly. So whether or not it's fingerprints or your retinal print, I always make my photographs smudgy enough so that the AI really can't work that well or at all in trying to place me in a database somewhere. Not that I do anything bad. I just don't want to be in that database. Although I know somewhere...
Nate Darnell in a war against detail.
Yeah, so somewhere I am, because I travel internationally, and they force you to take those like facial scans at this point.
Yeah.
But I just don't... It's one thing when the government does it. It's another thing when Facebook does it. And so I just have no interest in having Facebook scan my eyes and then auto-name all these other photos that somebody might have me in, that's me, right? No, it's like if you want to include me in a photo, ask me first.
Yeah. And we'll have to have a side conversation about Facebook's response to latest responses to Elizabeth Warren wanting to break up the big tech companies.
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
It's like, you can't do that. How could Facebook protect democracy if we don't have absolute control over the media?
Oh, yes.
I mean, that was essentially, slightly transcoding the words. That's
right.
exactly what Mark Zuckerberg's response to that was.
Exactly.
And it's like, and her response to that was like, you're not even listening to yourself. You just, it's like he thinks. Mark's so out of contact. He thinks that's a reason against breaking up Facebook.
Yeah, I guess I lost track of where Facebook became the de facto government for the United States. I guess that's where I just like somehow that mental leap was lost. I missed it.
Yeah, I guess Mr. Z has been considering himself the leader of the free world long enough quietly in his head, he forgot that he hadn't told anyone else that.
We'll talk about some of those personality traits on my show.
Excellent.
With firstborns and onlyborns.
And just another kind of side note, because like what we were talking about, like not wanting to have things unintentionally, I was saying fingerprints, you're talking about, text and stuff in the picture, having it low enough resolution. One of the technologies that's in this thing that's off by default is a overscan kind of thing, where you're taking a picture using the medium lens and it's using the wide angle lens to create a kind of a fill-in in case you want a wider one later. You can bring in some detail from the wide angle lens and use the detail from the regular lens in the center, and that's off by default. And I was just listening to someone, they were kind of theorizing that the reason that they did that was to prevent the unintentional inclusion of things you wouldn't want in the picture. Like, say, if you're, taking you're doing a carefully cropped artistic shot of a nude person or something, and the overscan would like pull in some detail that was not meant to be in the picture. Or if you had like your ledger open on your desk and you're taking a picture of some object. You don't want like your bank account numbers to, quietly be added to a picture that you did not frame in the shot.
See, that's why you have to reduce the resolution to a really low level so that.
Yes, yeah, I think there's definitely some value in that. I think that should be an option.
This is also why I don't have apps on my phone that auto-publish things to the cloud.
Right.
Like anything that I post on social media, it goes from my phone to my computer, where it goes into an image adjustment program where it's cropped correctly and then radically reduced in resolution and then uploaded. So it's just enough to have a fun time, have a laugh, see kind of who was there, but not enough for AI to get a hold of it and start auto-populating names in the picture.
There you go. Suggestive photography, where all the details are not included.
That's correct. So there's a level of personal creativity that you can add to it, and mysticism.
And in a nice. And to kind of carry on what I was saying earlier about the overshot feature, there was kind of a problem in the past regarding that with, like, say you would go in and edit a shot and crop it or something. Well, the thumbnail of the shot would still be of the full shot. So, maybe you carefully crop out, someone or something that you don't want to appear in a picture, and they go, whoop, I guess I still got a low res version of the whole thing because I can just, rip the thumbnail out of it.
But let me ask this. Was that because it was cropped inside the Facebook option, or because Facebook...
No, that was like a cropped in, like inside iPhone or whatever the photography app it was.
Okay.
When you cropped the shot, it still kept the thumbnail of the original.
You see, that's the challenge. See, and that's why I move it to another external program, where like GIMP, for example, graphical image manipulation program for Unix, which then once you crop it out, it doesn't have any of those thumbnails. So whatever program pulls it in next will generate the thumbnail based on the reduced image.
Yes, that's good. And I'm not even done with the metadata that you can get in there that's a problem. Like,
exactly.
Some people have had, like, you're doing something on your phone knows where you are.
See,
at one point, it put GPS locations in there.
I'm looking for a dumb phone, not a smartphone. I want to have some degree of control.
So like, there's one celebrity who was, like, taking pictures of a project he was working on in his garage, and he inadvertently gave away the GPS location of his house.
Wow.
So and I got another tip for how to dumbify your pictures. Dumbify your pictures in a real easy way. Make sure nothing's included you don't want included. I bring up the photo, I crop it the way I want it on screen, and then I take a screenshot of the screen with the cropping I want. Okay, so that's a completely new thing. I mean, I guess it could still have like GPS locations where I am at that moment, but generally screenshots don't. So it's literally just the picture I want. It has the unintentional for you would be benefit of lowering the resolution.
You're doing a screenshot though on your phone.
Right.
Okay. Right. I just wanted to be clear so that we were thinking the same direction. So you
can do the same thing on your desktop if you like, because a lot of these programs, you don't know how helpful they'll be in including your metadata across photos. Like, for instance, Audacity, the audio editing software we use here at the station, because it's a nice free thing to train people on.
Right.
Then they can use it at home. But one of the unfortunate things, to my mind, that it does is if you import something with metadata in it into a project that has no metadata, like, say, if I edited in a song into this show, then the metadata for that would transfer to the whole project, and the whole show would be, through the years or whatever, whatever the song is, and, it would say like, oh, it's this song, except it's 60 minutes long, and it's like, I didn't really want that in there. For me, it's a hassle because I have to program a lot of the audio for prereqs, and that metadata shows up instead of the file name you give it. And now I can't find the file I want to use in the system because it's mislabeled, because it was so helpfully grabbing metadata. So I think if there's a lesson from this for developers, it's don't so much optimize for metadata, because it's not one of those things where if a little bit good, a lot more is better. There is definitely a usefulness / threat curve to including too much metadata, and you want to at least give the user the option of saying, I just want to show this picture the way I'm seeing it with no other metadata whatsoever. That's no thumbnail, no title, no latitude and longitude, just the frickin' picture. So that's a hard-won lesson. And so I'm very encouraged that, there's a feature that could reveal data about you, and Apple had the foresight to actually turn it off by default.
So we need to come up with a mantra for managing life in the age of tech. Something that's equivalent. I don't know if you've ever heard this old adage, but this was uttered like decades ago. And it's dress like Coco, live like Jackie, act like Audrey, and laugh like Lucy.
So this is a notation from the 70s?
This is a notation from, I think, the 60s.
Yeah.
60s. And it was basically how to conduct yourself during...
And fill in the names for the millennials of who's being referenced there.
So Coco Chanel was a clothing designer. Jackie Kennedy Onassis was the wife of JFK. Audrey Hepburn, was a very famous actress. And Lucy was a very famous actress / comedian.
Yes.
Right. And so these were all tips on how to present yourself in life and in a public setting in ways that were dignified, funny, so on and so forth.
And so we'll just leave that as an exercise to the listener to, who are those people today?
Exactly. I mean, it's like this is one of the challenges, though. I even found a book the other day that was like how to act like Audrey in a Hilton world, or a Paris Hilton world.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that there used to be a degree of dignity, style, self-control. Even if you didn't agree with somebody, you could still have a civil discussion with them.
I remember the days.
And now society has derailed into an inability to communicate professionally and an inability to communicate civilly, a lack of style. Look around the difference between now and what it looked like in the 1940s and 50s. I mean, there's clearly a very big difference. To each their own. I grew up in the Gen X era, which was all about grunge. But hey, but the point being is that things have changed, and not always for the better in some cases.
Yeah, we'll move on with our next clip here. So I have a piece from the Creative Commons piece from the good folks at twit.tv. This is This Week in Google 527, talking about quantum supremacy.
This is Twit.
So Google's been doing some work in secret. NASA, which was a partner in this work, inadvertently published a paper which they almost immediately unpublished, but before too long, people were able to get a copy of it.
Of course.
The Google research paper was titled Quantum Supremacy Using a Programmable Superconducting Processor. Quantum supremacy is a term used by quantum computing folks. In fact, I'll point you to a really good and completely impenetrable blog post by the guy who coined the term, Scott Aronson. It's actually really great. Scott's Supreme Quantum Supremacy FAQ. He talks about what quantum supremacy is, but I will attempt in my own way to define it. It is essentially a proof that quantum computing works if a quantum computer can do something significantly faster than a Turing machine can do, then that's quantum supremacy. And in fact, in this paper, it was asserted that the Google quantum computer was able to solve a problem 50,000 times faster than the world's fastest traditional supercomputer.
That is amazing.
It's it's not a task you would want.
Right.
It's not solving a problem that anyone cares about, but it's merely a demonstration that you could do it.
It's proof of concept there.
It's kind of a random number thing, but it was able to do it, according to the paper, in 3 minutes and 20 seconds, what would take the world's fastest supercomputer, Summit, 10,000 years. But if you read the blog by Scott Aronson, you'll realize that it's more complicated than that. It's more complicated than that. So if you really care about quantum supremacy, it's probably worth reading this. He basically confirms the post, saying, yeah, I was involved in this. I've been trying not to tell anybody for a long time. It's been a big secret. Google pulled the article because they want to make a big splash when they announce it. It probably would behoove everybody to understand a little bit more about what this means. It does not mean that a quantum computer is around the corner. By the way, he says, I did not create the quantum supremacy phrase. It was coined by John Preskill in 2012.
Oh.
But he's widely considered to be the guy who first... Anyway, that establishes his bona fides for this article. And he talks about what the problem solved was likely to be and what it means, and it doesn't mean a lot of things. So this is important. It might, in fact, be the kind of thing that you'll look back and say, oh, I remember back in 2019 when we first... He likens it, Aronson likens it to Kitty Hawk.
Yeah.
So the first flight of the Wright brothers, which, by the way, didn't become public for months.
Right.
Certainly didn't imply that we'd be able to fly across the country or around the world in a jet airplane.
Just hobbyists doing what they do.
But it was the first time humans flew for any appreciable distance. And that's kind of what this is. So,
so what does it mean to Bitcoin?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. Some people brought this up. I don't know if it means anything for Bitcoin. It would mean maybe if you could create a Bitcoin miner out of a quantum computer, which, by the way, that's years and years off. You could perhaps make us some money, but that's not likely. Remember, these quantum computers have to be supercooled. They're very expensive to run. Right. They're very difficult to create, and they're incredibly unstable.
Right.
So it's not a practical
Sounds like
solution.
the perfect computer.
Yeah, just what you want. If you think your computer crashes
if you're an evil, rich monster, what do you do with it?
Nothing. It doesn't. It doesn't mean anything.
Not worth the trouble, even for evil, rich monsters.
Not unless you've got the research means of NASA and Google. No, but it's fascinating. And anybody who watches our shows and is interested in this kind of stuff probably really should read Scott Aronson's blog. His blog is scotaaronson.com, SCOTTAARONSON.com. But you could also search for Quantum Supremacy FAQ. You'd probably find it pretty darn. I doubt there's more than one.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. That was from This Week in Google 527, Quantum Supremacy.
Sounds a little frightening.
Yeah, it sounds a little frightening. It's the
Darth Vader-ish.
So the supremacy they're talking about was the ability of, they're kind of doing, and this is a point that gets crossed multiple times based on what your definitions are, but it's the concept is the point at which a quantum computer is doing some real work in a way that on some real-ish problem and does it faster than any conventional computer could. So we've had a lot of definitions of quantum computer. I remember when they were taking specially encoded synthetic DNA and putting it in a beaker and and shaking it and getting a quote unquote result from the way it combined, because it essentially was setting up a parallel computation from millions and millions of DNA strands combining in different ways, and the one that did the result that they were specially targeted result they were looking for would kind of drop out to the bottom, and they could scan it and that would give them a result. So it was a very tortured way of considering it a quantum computation, and there are different things where it's different natural processes are in some ways kind of recast and wow, look at all the quantum computation that's happening here. But for us, it's really as a practical matter, we're talking about electronically programmable. You don't have to like hand carve your quantum elements from scratch to do a specific problem that isn't very interesting, as they said. Like they made reference to solves a problem no one would want to solve, because they set them up to like, okay, what can we do with what we know in a way that the equivalent conventional computational processor would take a lot more time, and that's kind of what they're going for. But this was something where it wasn't the toy version; it was electronically programmable, and it's still not a terribly appealing or arbitrarily complex result, but I think it is a significant advance towards that goal. So it's quantum supremacy with lowercase letters, maybe we'll say. So at the point where we can just say, okay, throw a RSA encoded message over here, and the keys pop out the other end in a couple of seconds. That's going to be true quantum supremacy. Because there are some problems that are considered to be applicable to quantum style processes, the kind of the way we think it's going. And one of the things that RSA public key encryption is based on is the idea that it's easy to take two, admittedly huge prime numbers and multiply them together. But given that even bigger product of that multiplication, someone looking at it for the first time would have a really hard time factoring out what primes went into multiplying it. So that particular problem is one that they think would be pretty easily solved by a quantum computer once they, kind of have the general purpose bits and then enough bits. And often I didn't even hear how many bits of computation this was supposed to have, but some of the early ones, they're talking about, 4 bits or 8 bits of quantum equivalent computation. So we're talking about remarkably small solutions. And the fact that it's being done faster is kind of, trivial. It's like, how many fractions of a second is it being done in? It's like for this versus this. Okay, well, it's faster, but, who cares, because the difference is really small. But, it's getting there. And this is one of those technologies that's on one of those kind of what they call the hockey stick curve, where it's kind of going low and it's kind of going low. And this, I think, is probably one of those things that's starting to mark, we should see that real sharp inflection here real soon. And that'll be interesting to see what drops out of that. All right. Let's go to another piece. This is from, kind of going back to the casual approach that a lot of the mainstream workforce and IT departments have towards setting up their security, especially when it's the security of other people and not themselves. This is from This Week in Enterprise Tech 360. We work naked.
This is Twit.
Do you work from WeWork or know someone who does? Well, your data was probably visible. WeWork's weak Wi-Fi security has been leaving sensitive data accessible on its open network for years. That may have compromised both organizations that work in WeWork spaces and those that have never entered WeWork but do business with companies that use its offices. Reports from Fast Company and CNET have taken us into the critical issue of WeWork's oversight and implications for its customers. The findings come from Timo Iromo, who, according to CNET, evaluated WeWork's Wi-Fi security in 2015 before moving his digital media company into one of its Manhattan offices. He was able to view hundreds of other companies' financial records and devices on the building's network, and upon alerting the community manager, he found out that WeWork, well, they already knew about it. WeWork Wi-Fi is protected by a password, which CNET says appears in plain text on the WeWork app. Multiple WeWorks in New York and some in California share that same password. Now, Iromo has continued to run regular Wi-Fi scans on the WeWork network, scans that show 658 devices exposed in an astronomical amount of data, including financial records, business transactions, client databases, emails from other companies, driver's license and passport scans, job applications, contracts, lawsuits, banking credentials, and, oh, by the way, health data.
And you're listening to Northwest Tech Show on KMUZ. That was a Creative Commons clip from the good folks at twit.tv. This Week in Enterprise Tech 360, talking about the low security on the WeWork network. So, again, this is just something that happens sometimes when, it's like, hey, we've done the feature on the box. We've said, this workspace, it includes Wi-Fi. Okay, well, we got a password. We threw something out there. And in a lot of cases, having a publicly known password on your Wi-Fi isn't a horrible thing in terms of, each individual connection is still encrypted individually, just from the fact you're using WPA2 or something, which is the recommended one right now, which they've, found some flaws in that one through forcing repeated logins or something, but it's still a lot better than WEP or having no password at all. So, that's not necessarily a problem. But what the problem is that once you're on that network, everything's on the same network. We've kind of talked about with Internet of Things devices that may have very old security kernels and be very easy to hack and then become a bridge to other areas of your network. If you have something that the only purpose of it is, to go out to the internet and do something, well, set up your network so that it can't see other things on the network, that each one is its own little silo, so it can only go out to the general internet and not become kind of a traitor inside the moat, that can then jump on your other systems. Because, even a printer can be hacked in some cases, if it's got the wrong firmware. There were cases of, people being able to, a printer being just sophisticated enough to be worth taking over and just dumb enough to not be properly secured. And then it becomes a bridge for attacking other systems inside your network. So just, I think that's the, one extra thing. These things only happen because the consumers are not aware of the implications. So if the people going into that space were as horrified by that each device has complete access to the same shared network, even across different businesses that are within the WeWork facility, they should be just as horrified as if there were no password at all. And so every time we talk about it, we're moving a little bit further down that road. So insist on good security. And hey, just if nothing else, don't count on someone else's security. Use your own Wi-Fi box, maybe with a virtual private network attached to it. So you don't really care what's going on with the local internet any more than you would in an internet cafe. And you have a VPN; it just bypasses all that stuff. So that's one way to do it. But even then, make sure within your network of your own devices that things don't have access to each other if they don't need it. There are options you can set now on routers that will put them in a mode where each one can only go out through, like say in this example, your VPN connection, but can't talk to anything else on your real local area network. So look for that. All right, we're getting down towards the end of the show. I did get a call this week from an old friend from Microportal, Mark, and he was talking about some. He was encouraging me to talk about some developments on the SIM hack that we were talking about previously, the SIM jacker thing, and that it turns out that sounds like that was in some ways a little bit overblown, but in the SIM card it is a little computer that can run Java programs, and some of those programs have known vulnerabilities, and they've been sitting in there for years. But not every SIM card has them, and a lot of these commands can be stopped at the network level if by your carrier. So that's something to be aware. Look out for do your Google searches for. There are some software apparently now that can detect if you have a vulnerable SIM or not. So do your appropriate Google diligence on that, and find out if your SIM is vulnerable, and if so, see if you can change out to something a little different. And that does, by the way, still apply to eSIM, because an eSIM is really just a SIM card that's soldered into your phone. So the difference between eSIM and a regular SIM is a SIM can physically be removed and replaced. And with that, you've done it again. You spent an hour talking technology with Dave and Nate, and learning how better knowledge of technology can give you better results at home, at work, and in your civic engagements. I hope you'll join us next Wednesday and every Wednesday to continue this conversation from noon to 1 o'clock on Northwest Tech Show.